Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and an actual episode of Collecting Smart. I've been a slacker. My co-host, who I'm going to bring in here in a second, has been, probably the appropriate amount of prodding to try to get me to keep doing these. He hasn't pushed too hard, and I've just been a slacker. But we are back. We are going to be talking about some stuff today, so let's bring him in. What's going on, Big Will?
We're alive!
Yes, any delay in the show is all on right here. So we even have good ideas that we just haven't done because I haven't done them.
We actually had a list of which ones to do next and everything, and then he thinks of one yesterday, and we're like, okay.
It's how I function sometimes, I'm afraid. It's how I function sometimes. Hey. So we had a couple people hanging out here early. We had Unruly, Lewis, John's Comics with Kids. We got Tricky Trapster in the house right now. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with us. For those who don't know, this series is all about us just talking about things we've learned over the years in collecting, what we're seeing going on, and just giving some opinions and some thoughts that hopefully maybe you can use. This one was prompted not necessarily because of anything specific in the comic market, but because a video about fraud and market manipulation in the video game market dropped over the weekend, I think, or end of last week, I guess, right at Thursday or Friday last week, about Wada Games and Heritage and how basically some pretty stiff allegations. We're not going to go into the specifics of that. That's not why we're here, but we are going to talk about some of the things that are identified ways that they are being accused of manipulating the market, how we can fall victims to that as comic collectors, because any kind of collecting is open to those methods, whether it be large scale, what this guy is accusing these businesses of, or your comic shop, or, dealing with a seller on YouTube or whatever. They can do these kinds of things. So trying to be smart about identifying what's going on and not overpaying for stuff that we shouldn't be overpaying. So that's kind of where we're going to come at this from. I will say, that there was a lot of things in that video, and if you're interested, go watch it. I won't say, I have no idea if his accusations are true or not, but even if the one thing we know is true, which is Heritage employees can bid on their auctions, is pretty unethical.
And just heads up, it's 52 and some change minutes long.
Yeah, it is almost an hour long. So there's a lot of information there. So what's going on, Phil? What's going on, GTK? What is happening? We appreciate you joining us. So Big Will, when I brought this up, what did you think? What was your first thoughts about,
Well, my first thought was, hey, he must have saw that video.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what prompted it. I mean, we've talked about it a bunch. I mean, I know, I do the Look Back show, and where I look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. In almost every one of those, I get a comment about, not everyone, but at least probably every other week, I get at least one comment basically accusing Tom and Key Collector and CBSI of manipulating the market and pumping and dumping books, and, without any basis to, no proof to any of these, just saying, oh, that's all they're doing with these lists.
Yeah, well, it depends on your definition of manipulation.
Right.
If you just take the Oxford English Dictionary, the plain Jane definition of manipulation, yeah, they're both manipulating the market, but so are all of us when we mention anything about spec and be like, hey, you should check this book out. Yeah.
So market manipulation occurs constantly. It's what advertising actually is. Every time you're advertising anything, you're trying to manipulate the market. And there's ethical ways to go about that, like trying to push your product and move things, and there are unethical ways. And we're really talking today, mostly focusing on the unethical stuff that can go on.
Usually the way you can tell the difference is that the ethical or amoral ways are the ones that everyone can see. It's when you take it and you hide it, that's when it usually becomes unethical.
Right. So what we've all seen in this last year is in all, whether it be video games, comic books, trading cards, is an explosion in the market. Some of that I think is real.
Price. Yeah.
And some of that has been manipulated on all of us in terms of, and the biggest driver that that all of this relies on is FOMO, is our own like, oh no, I have to get this. I have to be willing to pay more than I was going to, or otherwise I won't. So I could cut this video short and just say, don't fall victim to FOMO, but that's easier said than done. Like, am I wrong? What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's a lot of people have I only know comics.
Right.
That's all I can speak for. I don't know nothing about the video.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to focus.
Or anything like else. But as far as comics, I think a lot of people, thanks to the media such as movies and cartoons and everything else, we have a lot more eyes on us. And ever since the early 90s, we had an actual speculator bubble that eventually popped. People have had it ingrained in them that in general, comic books, if you buy it at X price this year, in a few more years, you'll be able to sell it at 2X price.
Right.
And I think people are looking at that, looking at all these movies, and they're diving in without checking what the census data for the two grading companies are, without even checking out what kind of print runs the books are talking about. Because depending on the era they were printed, if it's a book from the 80s and up, there's newsstand and there's direct. Which one's which one's rare, all those things. People don't really, I think, aren't paying as much attention to that because they're new money. And I think that, as well as the actual real thing that happens where comics do, the good ones, raise up in value. Not,
right.
There's 90s trash. We all talk about 90s trash, but your key books and everything like that, they do tend to go up. And I think that's what some of this is that the market's being manipulated by people that don't know what they're doing, basically.
So Unruly's making a good point. Like, the accusations in other video are like about an organized, big, like, effort to manipulate the market on sealed video games and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and we're going to get into why some of it is not as easily done in the comic market. Not that it couldn't be, that it's a smaller scale, but it doesn't mean those same methods don't work, and that you can't be the victim of those if you're not knowledgeable about what you're dealing with. Some of the things he talks about is shield. I can't even say it, but fake bidding of running prices up. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, funny thing about shield bidding is it's not illegal.
No.
It depends on what the place that the auction house, what their rules are. For example, eBay specifically says, if you look in their terms of service and everything, no shill bidding.
Right.
And a company got in trouble for doing that, and they got kicked off the platform.
A recent trading card company.
I don't think that's the same deal for most of the auction houses.
Well,
I do believe that's
one of the reasons that Heritage is located in Texas is because Texas is the Wild West. They pride themselves on being the Wild West, and they can do that. And that's like, legally they can do it there. Doesn't mean it's ethical. Legally they can do it. Heritage, well, not shield bidding necessarily, but Heritage employees can bid. They're allowed. That's part of their rules, which opens you up to, obviously, if you don't have transparency in who's bidding and that kind of stuff, makes that really easy to accomplish and get by with people. Yeah. Without you knowing that that's what's happening to you. But you see it, like eBay has a policy against it. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you it happens on eBay.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can't try. There's so many things that they would have a hard time proving it all the time. But you'll see these outlier auctions that go for 2 to 3 times what buy it nows are listed for on books. And like, so it's happening. It's just being aware, which comes back to your knowledge of knowing when to stop and when to get out.
Yeah. And that, I think, a lot of people could really use a lesson in knowing when you're at your top,
Yeah.
Because shield bidding would not affect me at all, because I go into a mindset with, this is my top. If it goes over this, I ain't gonna get it. So even if someone bids me up to it, they're gonna walk away with it, not me.
And that's the key to all of this we're going to talk about, is knowing what your limit is, being willing to walk away.
And I say that from experience of not stopping when I should have stopped.
Yeah.
It's just my experience happened years ago.
Yeah. It's happened to anybody who's ever participated in this kind of market, or been to an auction in person. Like, I've stood there and watched things at like private auctions and stuff, and the auctioneer gets going and people just run something up to a stupid price, and then there's another one later down the board and it goes for a third of that to the second guy. They argued over the slightly better one, and paid 3 times, and then there's another one in the auction and it doesn't go for near as much. People fall victim to that all the time. And having a budget, understanding the only way to really to deal with that, if you know what's going on, is you have to set your limit and don't go above it. Don't be sucked into, well, maybe if I go 5 more, I'm close. You know what? You lose by 50 cents, you lost by 50 cents. It went over your budget.
And beware of, we don't know how many comics there are.
Yeah.
We know how many have been graded, but we don't know how many are raw and are out there. And a lot of things, Very Gary had a video where he bought a collection, and in the collection was a comic shop's diamond box of Spawn #9.
Yeah.
It was filled with, I think, a few hundred Spawn #9s, near mint condition. And he sold a few of those, and one guy sent in I think 50, and over half came back in a 9.8.
Yeah.
So there are books from the late 80s and up. I know there exists somewhere. It may never be found, but there's probably someone who has a box of 200 near mint copies of New Mutants 98. There's probably someone that has the same box of X-Men 4. All it will take is for them to send those in to get graded, or better yet, slowly hit them out on eBay raw, and that could really affect the market, having that much dumped at one time.
Well, and how they dump it. If they dump it.
And it's how they dump it.
Yeah. If they dump it over the course of 10 years, people might not even notice. If they dump it in months, everybody's going to notice. And
And that's another reason why you got to pay attention to how many books were printed, estimated when
those
the
are
book
estimates.
was released, and how many are, if you're buying graded, how many are on the census of both companies.
And that was one of the accusations in the video, was talking about that Wada Games doesn't have a census. They don't tell you how many they've done of anything.
Well, I think they are one of the biggest and baddest as far as video game grading. So it would behoove them to get one done and put it out there. But in their defense, CBCS didn't have one for.
Oh, I know. I was actually going to get to that. The one thing is that we've had is, for a long time, CGC has had a census.
Yeah, and I believe theirs started either the year they started or a year later. I think they've had the census.
And CBCS has not. And it's been one of the major complaints why people didn't use CBCS. People didn't necessarily want to buy CBCS as much, was the lack of a census for a long time. It was a major issue with them, and the lack of transparency of what they actually had and had put on the market. Now, neither of those censuses are perfect, because we've all cracked books. Well, not most everybody has cracked books and sent them back. CPR books, and do you always turn in the label? Have all those labels been turned in? Heck no. Has books coming from CBCS that went to CGC? Did the CGC send those labels to CBCS and say, "Hey, take this off your census"? Heck no.
Well, we don't know if they do on that. I would, in a perfect world, they would. But yes, Simeon.
Yes.
Both grading companies have a census.
Both grading companies have a census. So that at least allows you to, again, it's probably not perfect, but those are pretty, like, gives you a fairly accurate number of what's out there. So that you know when, and let's run through your example just to give like some percentages, like that you were going to talk about, if you want, right now.
Well, I noticed that thanks to them moving the movie back, and I don't think some people like the trailer. Carnage has been 361, ASM 361, been on a downtrend a little bit. And I was curious about how many are actually graded versus the price that is being charged. Yeah. And I also compared it to New Mutants 98. Now, New Mutants 98 in a 9.8 is around $3,000.
Yeah.
And then the 361 of ASM is around $1,000 right now.
Yeah.
But if we look on the census, there are over 21,000 copies of ASM 361 graded
by CGC.
By just CGC.
CBCS.
I didn't bother bringing up CBCS.
Yeah.
And of those, there are over 5,000 9.8s. And in comparison to the book that's 3 times the price, New Mutants 98 has just over 21,000 copies graded. Yeah. Actually, it's 21.5. And of those, over 4,000 of them are a 9.8.
Yeah. 4,000 9.8s out there.
So there's like there's like what is that? Like a fifth difference?
Yeah.
20% difference. But yet it's what? 200 something percent price
difference. Yeah.
And it makes no sense. So that tells you
some of that's popularity of the character, some of that, the media stuff. Yeah.
It tells you to pump your brakes and make sure of what you're buying.
Yes, is what it does. Like those are some of the, some of those books, particularly Spider-Man books, like 300, 361, New Mutants 98. Some of those books have huge numbers of graded copies. Just massive pool of books that are out there to buy from. It tells you 2 things. Like if you understand what the census number is, it tells you, okay, is this really something I should have any kind of FOMO about? Because more than likely, guess what? There's 37 more copies sitting on eBay right now that you can go get if you lose out on this one. And having that information and knowing what is available to you, how hard it is to actually get, like the old talks about some of the gold stuff, makes it easier both to deal with the FOMO and makes you more informed to like not fall into some of these traps that they try to set in telling you how rare this is, how hard it is to get. We've all seen highest on the census on eBay listings. Well, yeah, along with like 5,000 other copies of that book. Like, I've seen them list that for 300, or and it's like
most of those I've seen have been on like pre-code horror and stuff. Where
no, I've seen it on modern stuff.
Oh, you do?
I have seen people.
That's just stupid.
I've seen that on modern. Like people will put in the tag highest on the census. I'm like, there's like 4,000 of those.
Yeah. And just another example here with the 2 books I mentioned. There are 4 9.9s of ASM 361.
Right.
There are no 10s. There are 13 9.9s of New Mutants 98 and 1 10.0.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not, what I'm not saying is that you shouldn't want the book or you shouldn't try to get the book, and that there aren't people out there that want it. The reason it's worth what it's going for is there is a demand. Demand exists.
Yeah.
But it's also important to know, like, have a balance of what you're willing to pay versus how prevalent is it? How easy, how hard is it actually to get this? Yeah. Is it really worth $3,000 or to you, or not.
If you want a Hulk 1 in a certain grade, you're probably going to need to buy it as soon as you see it in that grade, as long as it's within a nice big range.
Yeah.
Or you're going to wait maybe a year or more.
Yeah.
To see that book. ASM 361, if you don't have it this week, you can get it next week when you have the money.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can wait. There's plenty of them. As a matter of fact, you got an excellent chance of getting one of those raw and sending it in yourself, and it'll be a 9.8.
Yeah. And that's the thing. He's talking about, there's a lot more people that want a 9.8 than there are currently on the census, even with those big numbers. True. That's why they sell it all. If there wasn't, then there wouldn't be a market for them. But there's still, like Big Will talked about, we have an estimate of what's actually out there. But we don't know. There's a bunch of them that are still out there. Like Old talked about it, that they think, most of the books are still raw and still out there. And even from Golden Age, and you think about modern stuff, there's 21,000 is a huge number to be slapped. What's the print run on
basic thing that we're saying is pump the brakes, investigate a little bit, make sure it's the right price with your budget, the grade you want, and the copy you want.
Right.
And then make sure everything meshes. That's what we're saying.
Yeah. And one of the tools I use all the time, even if I'm buying from somebody else or I'm buying on, in a comic shop, if I go in and see something listed and I'm not super familiar with what it's going for currently, is I never buy anything anymore without looking at eBay sold prices. Now, to have an idea of what people are actually willing to pay for this, what it's actually going for, and whether or not what you're looking at, the price you're getting, because people love to mark. Like a comic book shop is like a car lot. They're going to market like it's always negotiable, and they always start high because they know they're going to negotiate. And if they don't, then they're probably not a very good seller in a comic shop. And understanding what it's actually going for, but also don't just look at a couple of sales. See if there's a trend. The other day, I had a book on the look back list. The most recent sale was $125. I was like, what the heck? No other sales were above $50. There were books listed for like $40. Buy it now. Look perfect. Like high grade. And so clearly either somebody didn't do the research, something funny was going on with the sale. There was something there. So I wouldn't even consider that when I'm thinking about what I would pay for that book. That sale just would be a complete outlier. It doesn't matter. And it's not the new floor because one person paid it. And that's what all the people selling are going to be like, oh, it went for this much, I'm going to mark it up. Doesn't mean you have to buy it right now.
Yeah.
Not a bad
I wouldn't call that an investment. I'd call that a speculation.
Yeah.
An investment is something that you would buy and you want to hold for 5 years or longer, and that in general, no matter what happens, it's going to go up in value pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, if you're buying ASM1, that's an investment. That's a book that's never coming down. It's just going to go up at whatever pace you want to say. If you're buying 361, you're specking based on the movie and everything else. And that, if you're buying to sell, like if you're buying it from a turn perspective and not if
you're buying it expecting and planning to sell it in less than 5 years, that's also speculation. That's not an investment, because there's too much volatility in the fact that we live in reality. Things happen sometimes.
So we've talked a little bit about like a couple of things that they spent a lot of time on that video: the shill bidding, the lack of a census, or the fact is we're lucky that we have a census. The other thing we're lucky is that unlike some of that particular realm of collecting where it hasn't been big business until just recently, there's a long history of comic collectors. There's a lot of collectors that have been around a long time.
Yeah.
And
we already had a
people coming in that can be victimized, but there's a lot of people that have seen a lot of this.
But we already had a speculation bubble in the 90s. And yeah, people are doing some things now, but it is in no way like before. And most everyone that's doing things now is in the community in some way. Most of them.
That's what I'm calling the resource sectors. Yeah, I mean, and to a certain degree, this last year has been because we're in a bubble right now. Like there has been a COVID bubble in the collectibles market.
Yeah.
Now, how big a bubble? How well it sustains? How bad is the pop when it pops? I don't think any of us know yet.
I would just always buy and hunt. I say this in my series of bad idea videos or bad investments, bad advice.
Bad advice, yeah.
Remember, the bear is coming.
Yeah.
The bear is always coming. So hunt like the bear's behind you and pay the prices as if the bear's about to swipe down on you. The bear is always coming, no matter what.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what that reference is, it's from the stock market. A bull market is a market where everything is going up and everyone's happy. And it's called a bull market because a bull will go down and swipe up with his horns in order to attack. Whereas a bear market is a market where everything is being sold and tanking. And it's called a bear market because a bear attacks with his paw swiping down.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are where most people don't understand where those names come from. But yeah. Remember the bear is out there. Yes. And I mean, and we are very much been in a huge bull market for the last 18 months. And maybe even longer than that, really. Like the 18 months has been like really big. But
yeah, well, before COVID, ever since about 2009, 2010, we'd been in a bull market, longest bull market we ever been in. And then COVID sank it a little bit. And now we have this in the collectibles market, an extreme bull market. Yeah. And now I think it's on the edge of starting to turn down, and it's either going to swoop back up or pop, and we'll see where all the pieces lay.
Yeah, and like I think that, and I do think there's going to be a difference in what books like really pop and what books just settle in at new floors. Like, I think like some of these older books, some of these keys, Giant Size X-Men, it's not coming back to where it was 2 years ago. Now, does it stay where it's at? It's already showing signs. Like if you've been watching it, it's already showing signs of settling.
Well, it gained on average in all the grades. It gained what, like 50 or 60% of price?
In some grades, almost 100. Like,
okay, well, let's say the average is 70.
Yeah.
If it gained 70%, I would say it's going to have a new floor, like Unruly says. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And the new floor will probably be after a drop of about 35 to 50. And so you have about 20% on top of the old normal, and that's your new floor. Something like that.
Something like that. Maybe I think a book like that, I think it's going to be maybe less than that of a drop. But a lot of other stuff, it might be more than that. Like, I think you're looking at, some books are going to go back to where they were. Some of this modern stuff, I think, not all of it. Like, I don't think Miles has ever come back to where it was. But I think there's a new floor. There's a much higher floor on him than what it was before. Mm-hmm. But in his case, we're talking about like a 2,000% increase. You're talking about a book that went from like $200 to $2,000, $3,000.
So we're sort of talking about the. I'm way off. I may be, but the new floor is coming, and it will be a drop from where it's at now. But it's never going back.
Yeah.
The way, I agree with you there. So.
Oh, that is losing.
Let's move. Why would lies and cheats that you can look out for?
Yeah. So Go ahead. You had something here. I think you were wanting to start, or was there not?
Well, no, I'm gonna let you.
Well, the other thing I had just that they really were pointing out in that video was the hype talk, and like our whole market right now is completely manipulated by Kevin Feige saying boo, and the whole market goes, oh, we're going over here because of the movies. Now, that's market manipulation that really doesn't have anything to do with that. He's manipulating the market for his movies and to sell tickets, and we are a sub-factor of that. But we get that on a constant basis within our own community. Like on both anytime, we get my friend Burke Family 54 Comics. He puts out a 5 books to invest in or whatever, or to spec on every so often. Like any of those kind of videos, we get key collector alerts, and everything else are potentially manipulating the market. And I've seen it. I've seen books that somebody mentions on a video, then hits the list that week, and then a whole bunch of people buy it, and it goes from a $5 book to a $50 book, and 6 months later, it's a $5 book because somebody brought it up, pointed it out. Not all of that. I'm not accusing any specific person of being nefarious, but I guarantee you some of it is. There are people out there that are pumping and dumping that are using their platform to do that. I won't. I can't prove it. I can't, but I know we all know what's going on. So to me, but it can be very small scale. I think Key Collector, I'll be honest, I think some of what he's doing is inherently unethical because he's trading both sides, because he does his key alerts. And then he also tells you, well, what's hot and what you should buy, and he's doing both sides of the investing and everything else. So I think sometimes I think that he that's a line he probably shouldn't be walking, doing the videos with Tom plus doing the key alerts and stuff, because some of the times books show up on the list that Tom puts out, and it's really just because he put out a key alert and the value or nothing changed other than a few people bought it for what it was. But I don't necessarily think Nick's what some people accuse him of, but I do think that he's walking a very tight ethical line by doing both sides and doing that with Tom and putting out the alerts and everything else that he does. I think he's walking a line on terms of manipulating the market unintentionally.
Well,
go ahead.
I'm not sure I don't think the videos that Tom puts out have anything to do with manipulation. They're telling you what has been. Now, most of the time, that is because of the alerts and everything.
Yeah.
And then they, through the week, they got higher and they sold more copies, and then they come on the money like, hey, this sold this many more percent this week. I mean, well, that's because it did, but the reason why it did,
because you put out a key alert.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, and that's where I'm talking about, from an ethical standpoint of they're claiming to report this is what's happening. Now, there's absolutely people that buy off those videos. But he's also but they're not necessarily but when they talk about it, when he puts out a thing, he puts out a key alert and they're like, see, he was right. Now go. And then they say, you can go buy his access to his key alerts on their little video. You can pay for a membership. We'll give you 10 free days with Key Collector for these key alerts and stuff. So there's a little bit of confirmation bias that, he's a good source, that they're doing. And that's where I think it's the same thing as they talked about in that video of the Wada Games guy going on after a big sale and saying, see, graded Wada Games are the way to go. Look how much they're worth. It's the same kind of thing on a smaller scale.
Yeah, that's that thing with Tom and CBSI. Those are sell lists, not
they should be sell lists.
People confuse them.
Yeah, people definitely confuse them. They should be sell lists. They should be, this is going for good value right now. Now's your chance to get out of it. Now's your chance to make a profit.
Something advertised as it's hot now, that almost always means don't buy it now, sell it now. Yeah. Wait, someone might say 6 months, hey JP, and then you can buy it.
Yeah. But I think there's stuff going on because I've seen it, and it's not just like Nick or Key Collector. I've seen it. Like I've seen books that, well, for example, and I know like 100% this wasn't. Reggie started talking about making jokes on his channel because I remember I was watching about the Gibbon, and like people started saying in the Gibbon gang, and that book has such an artificial price now.
Yeah.
From Reggie and his Gibbon gang, and them joke up a joke that John mentioned earlier, like at the beginning, he was talking about the Yarn Man joke that Old Wolf and them were doing.
I was part of that one.
Yeah. I mean,
we actually managed to raise the price of that dollar bin book up for a little while to around $20, $30.
Yeah.
But we didn't manage to go much higher than that. And it was never on anyone's list or anything.
Right.
But I did send a copy to Comic Tom, and they opened it on air. And they didn't know I was sending it. So that is how it got mentioned on Comic Tom, in case anyone's wondering. It was me.
But my point in bringing these up is how easy it is for even somebody with the audience I have to mess with the market if they want to. Like Jim Comics, I think, has had books on the list a couple of times that have jumped for no particular reason other than he mentioned them, and then Key Collector and Tom talked about them and put them on the list, and like, yeah, like I think he did say that. I believe that is correct, Sam, because that was never his intention. But it's easy to do. Like, it's amazing how easily, if you have an audience and if you're willing to be kind of a punk about it, like to go after a book to spend like, I'm going to spend 6 months picking up $5 copies of this, and then come out, and if you have that kind of speculation audience and like you do speculation things, and then be like, have a eBay where you're selling it for under a different name and be like, hey, this is going to be a hot book. I heard this rumor. This I got optioned. Like, or whatever, and dump it. And people buy that crap, and they'll spend $15, $20. They spent $20 on Yarn Man because you guys are playing a joke. Like, so the methods work. So the key, the take home of this is, if you didn't care about it before I mentioned it, why do you care about it after? Whether I mention it or Tom mentions it or he mentions it or whoever.
I have always loved Deadpool, one of my second favorite character. I have yet purchased a New Mutants 98, but it's on my list. It's on my list of things to get. And it's because of everything hyping it up and the price and everything else. I'm just going to wait till it eventually drops, because we know it will. I mean, look at Thanos, perfect example.
Yeah.
If Disney finally crashes and burns at some point, or if we don't hear anything for years about Deadpool, the price will go down to a more reasonable
level. There's a ton of them.
It will never go back down to the $20 for a raw high-grade copy that there used to be, but it will go down. So I'm just probably going to have to wait. Or if you have a spare hold on a sec. Good Lord. Hey.
Big Will is a busy man, apparently. He's wheeling and dealing or something. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of my whole point of bringing up like the hype in the market manipulation goes back to the FOMO, that we buy things, we chase things that aren't on our list, that we didn't care about, that we rush to buy things that maybe I'd like to have that, but I've kind of put it off. It's not really a priority. And then suddenly somebody says it's important, and we go spend 2 to 3 times what we would have spent a month ago to get it now. And, so being aware of your own impulses on that, and how much you actually care about this book, how much you actually like really willing to spend. If you wouldn't spend $20 for it last week, why are you spending $60 for it right now? Because everybody says it's hot.
I'm sorry that my dad was searching for the keys I left him. He didn't realize he was sitting on them.
Parents.
Anyway, so what are we talking about?
We were just talking about like the ability, just YouTubers like being able to manipulate the market
influence the
intentionally or
market.
unintentionally, and the thing that somebody brings it up and then you go buy it for three times what it was a week ago.
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
you know.
And what I was going to say was, before my dad called, was if I had a spare $3,000 that I could care less what happens to it, I'll buy New Mutants 98 9.8 for $3,000, but I don't happen to have spare $3,000. But if you do, there's a lot of people that are like that and just buy the book.
So like Reggie himself has stepped back from this, like, because I'm almost 100% Sam's correct that he's made a video where he talked about like he wasn't going to promote it anymore because he didn't. It was never his intention to like alter the market on it, and it still sells because it's the Gibbon. Because Reggie talked about it.
It's also, I believe, a 20-cent Marvel from 71, and it's ASM, one of the hottest book to
hottest title
Marvel.
It is, yeah.
It's gonna go up to an extent anyway, because as we get older, we are 20 years into a different century than when comics existed. So
but I can tell you right now, though, for like generic thing, like very fine raw copies, like you can get very fine raw copies of some of those like early Mary Jane books and Gwen Stacy books that I like want, like that are in the double digits for less than that. Like if you look, less than the Gibbon.
True, but I was just saying that eventually the bronze will be the new silver, and then the copper will be the new silver, and then silver the new gold.
I mean, people talk about modern as like 90s and up. A 1990 book is 30 years old at this point.
Yeah. Besides, for the time it'll take modern era, like just the decade of the 90s books to become the new silver age, we'll be like 70.
Yeah.
So you got time.
Yeah. Okay, so you wanted to talk a little bit about like more of an individual dealer.
Well, since we're on YouTube, we could talk about how to be careful on these auctions and things.
Yeah.
Like when you buy a book, first off, if someone has a grainy camera and you haven't bought from them, plenty of times before, like I got a book here. I'll use an example. Okay, this is a new acquisition, actually. This is TOS 79.
Right. So a lot of times I'll show them like this and put you over here.
Like on an auction. Great Silver Age book. Now, if you have not bought multiple books from a person and they're trying to show it to you, like, check out the spine. You can't see jack crap from back here, man.
No.
Ask them to bring it up. And if they don't, red flag.
No.
And if they do, it ought to be fairly crisp and clear. Where you can actually see the spine. So make sure you ask. And if you don't know the person, also, can you see the back? I don't think you can.
No.
So I need to get it out. Ask me to get it out. I'm not going to for this, but mind you.
Yeah.
Get it out and show it to you. And if I don't want to, that should be a red flag. Because if I'm too scared to, that means I never open these. And the back cover could be gone. I have no idea because I'm too scared to open them. Or it means I don't want you to see something.
Yeah.
So always ask if you're not sure. And you can take me off full screen.
Oh, sorry.
When you're going through and looking at these auctions, make sure you're on live chat.
Yeah.
So you can see everything. And also make sure that when you're bidding, if other people that are selling on the panel are bidding, that's okay. Because the bids in the chat are not ahead of time. Like I'm talking to JP right now on StreamYard. It is delayed on YouTube. But the chat, if I'm looking at YouTube chat, and I type in, it's not delayed.
Yeah.
So it's okay if they do that. But if they start claiming something, that's when that might throw up some red flags. If
they're doing like some kind of claim, that kind of thing.
If someone is packing a book up on screen, pay attention to how they're packing it, because there are some guys that have great books, are good guys, and have great prices, but they can't pack to save their life. You know what I'm saying? So if you see them packaging, see how they package, and just be careful. And another thing is, if they ask for Cash App, I always say Cash App preferred because I prefer it. But just be forewarned, Cash App, there's no protection or anything. That's supposed to be a friends only kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you do PayPal, they're almost always going to ask for friends and family. Don't do it because you don't have any protection. If you're not willing to pay an extra 3.5% or 4%, I think it is now, in order to get the book, then you were overpaying for the book to start with. If they cannot afford to lose that percentage and just refuse you if you don't do friends and family, then they shouldn't be selling it because they're not making any money.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask things, and don't be afraid to say, hey, I'll do this. Worst that can happen is they say no. And if no money's exchanged, no book's been exchanged, no harm.
Yeah. Like and I get it. There's some people that I know well enough at this point that I would do friends and family for. But in general, like on an auction, I ain't doing it. Like, and I don't want people, like, if I'm selling, I don't want to do it. Like, I want that level. I'll pay the 3%. I don't care. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me to do that. Like, if you're buying on Instagram or whatever, is grainy photos or not showing. Like, to me, like, particularly if you got bigger books, they should be offering photos. Like, hey, you want to look at photos on my Instagram or whatever. Like, I realize it's a pain if you're going through but half those auctions, they go around the circle like 5 times in the course of a night because they're so slow.
I know. That's one thing I hate about the YouTube auctions. But you can get some good deals. But worst case scenario, if you're taking pictures of a book, front cover, back cover, centerfold, where you can see the staples and the interior pages to see the color. At a minimum, that's what pictures should be taken. And we have a dissenting opinion. What's he say?
I disagree. If you know someone, I did an auction one time, but most people I know me and how my books are pristine.
But something could happen, and it could be USPS's fault or UPS's fault. And it just makes it a lot easier if you have more protection than less. And sometimes if you get $50 if you do priority mail automatic. If you have a $112 book, I'm not paying extra money to put, insurance on it. I'm going to insure it myself. I will be willing to pay the person if something happens. But, if you're not and you don't do the insurance for that little bit, there's no protection there. So I'm just saying, you can do whatever you want to do. We're not your daddy. We're not telling you what to do. We're just offering suggestions here. I would just.
All I'm saying, Carlito, I get what you're saying, Carlito, and the people that know you are buying from me, and like you would be somebody that I would not have qualms about. But in general, if it meant as a buyer, even if it means I have to do it, and like they're gonna have a hissy fit if I pay goods and services. If you can't afford the 3%, then you're probably selling it for too cheap. And if not, then as a buyer, I'll pay the $103 as on Sam's example to you via goods and services, so you still get your $100. Like, and then at least I have a recourse if something were to happen. Like, I get you're saying, if you really know the person, but Do we really know each other? Like, I mean,
wait a sec, Carlito. You said you lost money because they paid goods and services. Are you saying that you totaled everything up and then they paid that total as goods and services? Is that what you're saying? Because I noticed a lot of people don't do this. Let's say it's 4% is the goods and services charge. That would mean that whatever total you get from the auctioneer, that would mean that is 96% of what you need to pay.
Yeah.
So you would have to do the math on that. What is blank is 96% of what number? That what number is what you pay. And that way, when the percentage is taken out, it's the exact amount that they asked for.
Yeah.
I think that's what Carlito's saying. A lot of people like, hey, you want it for $10 plus 10 shipping, that's $20. And then they pay $20 goods and services. And you wind up losing 4% off the $20 because they didn't add it.
Right. And I get that. And you need to make, if you're going to do, as a seller, you got to make clear what you're actually saying. Is if you're paying goods and services, I'm expecting goods and services. Personally, like as a seller, I'm going to just, you'd lose the 4%. I'm just going to eat the 4%. Like, and I'm going to start books and price books according to the expectation that the goods and services are going to come out of it. You go on eBay and you sell it, you're losing 13, 14%. You go on, like everything else, you're losing 10+% as opposed to selling on YouTube. Like there's just part of your business.
Well. What? I just eat it as well. And if I'm doing it auction style and the book doesn't go up to where I'm going to make a profit, well, that's one particular book I don't make a profit on.
Then you probably started it too low.
Yeah, well, I mean, or I was trying something and it didn't work.
Yeah.
But knowing that is the point. Is if you know it going in, you're okay. And the collector says no one really does it by the 96%. Yeah, I know. That's why the math is always off a little bit. Yeah. But that if you want to get it exact, that's how you would figure it.
Yeah. No, you're right.
And yes, Carlito said it was a friends and family auction and they did goods and services instead. And that's how he lost the money.
Right.
And it was clear if you didn't want to pay for it. Okay, see, that's another thing. Make sure you look at the instructions of an auction. If they say we only do friends and family, we will not do other, and that's how you want to do it, well, then you can't be in that auction.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's fine. Like if that's the rules, if that's the rules of the auction, and I don't know the person, trust them 100%, then I'm not going to bid in that auction. Not that I bid that often anyway, because I'm broke half the time. That's a different issue. That's to do with my job, not with the comic. They are often confusing, and and I get it, and I get that you want to do that, but the part of that's probably why you have such a narrow window of profit is because you probably don't have that many people in your auction because you only have people that really know you that are willing to do friends and family.
And the collector mentioned here, they want you to add the 4% to your total you buy. So if you purchase a book for $100, they want you to pay $104. Yes. Now this is where we're saying if you can't afford to eat, some of the percentage and you're the seller, then you shouldn't be selling. It's because that actually means that PayPal is going to take 4% of $104, not $100. So that means they would take out an additional 16 cents above what they were supposed to. Now that's only 16 cents, so it doesn't really matter. But it is making it less than the 100. And if you do bigger numbers, it's not 16 cents. It can be $16.
Yeah. So, okay, we're coming up on our hour here, Big Will. Any claws? Little turd.
Any owl?
The cat just jumped up on my lap and dug in as she was doing it. My leg is probably bleeding. Little turd. But we're coming up on the hour. The dog is it's time for my walk. Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
I would just say if you can learn how to grade, and if you can learn to pump the brakes and investigate everything before you spend a lot of money, you'll be doing almost nothing wrong in your collecting.
Yeah.
And you'll almost have no trouble.
Yes, the cat did take 4% of my skin right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, I think the big key is, like, there's no way to be 100% safe that people aren't trying to mess with you. But if you set your prices, if you understand what the value is to you as well as the market, like sustain value, not like when prices are going crazy, like don't necessarily jump on the train, and just be smart about how you're spending your money, who you're buying for, what the grade of the book is, and be willing to walk away. You have to be willing to walk away. Like, it's hard. It sucks to not get something you really want, but you got to be willing to walk away. Oh, no fighting, you two. Good grief. Now she's hissing at the dog, and he's mad because he wants his walk. So we're going to wrap this up. Hey.
Dogs barking, dad's calling, cat's taking 4%.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. I'll be right back. Hang on a second. Talk to him for a second, Big Will.
Okay. Hey, how you doing? This here's Big Will. This is Big Will Radio. And I don't know what I'm doing. But anyway, yeah, this is a good discussion, guys. And yeah, Knights of Old, don't try to keep up with the Joneses. That could be a good one. Unless it is Indiana Jones. I agree with Bearded. And in that case, just sit tight and don't worry about it, because if you paid attention to Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones could have not been there at all, and it would have happened the exact same outcome. So,
okay, I have no idea what you guys are talking about Indiana Jones. Sorry, I had to just calm the dog for a second so we could get out of here. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me and Big Will, doing a Collecting Smart. I appreciate it. Main thing is just be smart when you're thinking about it. Do your research. Know what you're getting into, and that'll help you make better decisions and not fall.
Check the back cover and the pages.
Yeah. Open the book. Make them take it out. As Burke learned just recently trying to buy a Detective Comics 359, and he got it home and it was cut up and everything else.
Oh, have I got a story?
Yeah.
We don't have time.
But yeah, know what you're doing, know what you're buying, know what you think it's worth, and be willing to walk away, and you will not be a victim to this kind of stuff. So, all right, thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time.